Hello and welcome to We Follow the Town, a weekly podcast both previewing and reviewing Ipswich Town games. And I'm joined today by the EFL fan zone's very own Gabriel Sutton. First of all, Gabriel, how are you? And what have you made of Ipswich's season so far?
I'm very well, thanks, Ben. Good evening. I think again it's been a pretty poor season so far, you'd have to say, and I think a lot of Town fans kind of feeling similar vibes to last season, where you got a lot of points on the board pretty early on, but a lot of fans felt it was kind of unsustainable and results have kind of dipped with that. What I would say is that it seems like some encouragement can be taken from that 2-0 win over Blackpool on Saturday. And I look at the introduction of Luke Matheson, who was brilliant for Rochdale and earned that move to Wolves. And then even Miles Kenlock at left back. So, the two fullback areas where you'd had Luke Chambers, of course, and Stephen Ward, two aiding players who are not really going to attack the flank as much. Matheson and Kenlock could be the answer to that. I think this is probably last chance saloon for Kenlock at Portman Road. But you've also brought in Troy Parrott up top, and he's a very highly rated young striker. So, it's not been a good season so far, and I still think you've got a lot to prove to suggest that you can challenge for even the playoffs this season. But at the same time, some encouragement to come from that win over Blackpool and the business that you've done in the last week or so.
So a question that's come up a lot lately on this podcast is Paul Lambert's future. Do you reckon that Paul Lambert is the right man to take Ipswich ahead? Because we won last time out. Many people are wondering whether that is the start of a turnaround. There are still those who are very uncertain about it.
Yeah, I mean, from a neutral perspective, I get the sense that it's very much a majority now that's anti-Paul Lambert, and I've certainly seen some quite strong views on that situation. It feels like quite a long time, I think, since Paul Lambert's actually overachieved in management. He obviously got that team, certain team from up the road, the back-to-back promotions, and the year in Premier League, I think it was. But that was, you're talking sort of 8 years ago now, 9 years. So I think that doesn't really count. So for very much, and I think since hasn't worked with Ian Culverhouse. He's had a stint at Aston Villa where he's been allowed to spend a lot of money. Didn't do too well there. Now, off the top of my head, I think he went to Blackburn after Villa and kind of had a slight, a pass stint there. And then there was Wolves, where again you'd probably say a pass stint. It might have been the first year of Foden International. So they'd had Walter Zenga there, and then he had gone, and then Lambert took over, and again kind of kept them up, but didn't really do anything particularly special. Then relegated with Stoke, and then of course relegated with yourself. So you're looking at a couple of past stints in the last sort of 7, 8, 9 years, and probably 3 pretty poor stints with Villa, yourselves, and Stoke. So I think he's shown very little to suggest that he's the right man to take it back on an upward trajectory, and maybe not working with someone who's a bit more of a nuanced tactician like an Ian Culverhouse. Maybe that affects him a little bit.
I was just about to mention Ian Culverhouse because he was very successful with Lambert at Norwich. Do you reckon Paul Lambert without Ian Culverhouse is, I don't really know how to put this, but do you reckon he's not very good? I probably haven't put that in the right context at all, so apologies to Paul Lambert if he's watching.
Well, I think there's two things. I think firstly, I think the absence of someone with that tactical acumen has certainly affected him, as I referred to in my first answer. I also think that even the motivating aspect of Paul Lambert maybe wasn't as strong as it was, because I think if you look at his time at Norwich, I have it on quite good authority that he was quite a forthright character in that time, based on the way he kind of handled media and things like that. And I would imagine some of the characters Norwich had in that time maybe had the mentality to kind of rise to that style of management. But I think as the game has evolved, we're seeing maybe more millennials coming into football, and I think there's an increasing challenge for managers to manage younger players. And I would question whether Lambert has been able to adapt with that. And I think that could be part of why he's maybe struggling as well.
So we mentioned this briefly earlier, but Ipswich Town have made 4 loan signings: Troy Parrott, Luke Matheson, Luke Thomas, and Josh Harrop. Josh Harrop previously at Manchester United, if you remember. What do you make of these loan signings? Do you reckon that they could be the players to turn Ipswich's season around?
Possibly. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm a massive fan of Luke Matheson. I wouldn't say that he's necessarily a direct right back in the sense of someone that's going to hit the byline, but I do think he has got that attacking intent, and I think he's got lots of quality. There was a goal that Rochdale scored last season. It was away at Rotherham, and I think normally when a right back gets to the byline, or certainly deep into the final third, they would be a temptation for them, especially a young right back, kind of fizz it across the box. But Matheson actually had the composure to sort of pull it back, and he picked out a lad called Aaron Morley, who sort of produced a really good finish. And that was just one move, but I think it shows how Matheson has a maturity to his game that very few players who are, I think he's 18 now, actually have. So I think that's a massive addition, and I certainly think he's going to improve your productivity down that side from someone like Luke Chambers, who, Chambers can get to the odd, back post cross from Stephen Ward once a game, maybe, but he's not really going to give you much of an attacking threat, I wouldn't have thought. In terms of the others, you're looking at Troy Parrott. Didn't quite work out for him at Millwall, but he didn't too often play down the middle, whereas Ipswich have promised Tottenham that he will get a run of games down the middle in his favourite position. And I think that's probably why that deal was allowed to happen. And then in terms of Josh Harrop, I think he's shown flashes of potential at Preston North End. From what I've seen of Harrop, I feel like he's very quite one-footed. He liked his right foot. There's that debut goal he scored for Manchester United where he kind of got in from the left and curled it into the far corner. And I suppose that's the kind of thing that you'll be hoping he can produce. But maybe sometimes if there's occasions where he needs to cut onto his left foot, maybe he's a bit more limited in that department. And obviously he struggled to establish himself a bit more in that North End side, which is, I suppose, is why he's been willing to drop down to League One. But he certainly has some quality. So I do think that those additions, including Thomas, who done well so far as well, they certainly add a bit of talent and quality to the squad.
So, final question before we go on to the Peterborough game. I was talking on the podcast the other day, about Luke Chambers and how many think his career at Ipswich Town is slowly coming to an end. Do you reckon Luke Chambers is kind of being phased out of the squad? And what have you made of his career at Ipswich? Because he's certainly been one of the best captains we've had, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. There was that role he played in the 14-15 playoff campaign, wasn't there? I think he played at right back for a lot because he had Christoph Berra and maybe Tommy Smith in that side who were actually the centre backs, and he was the right back. And fantastic pro. And anyone who's played the number of games for Ipswich that he has, I think, deserves some recognition. I don't really see him as a right back because I just think at his age, 35, I think, I don't think he's got the mobility for the role. And as much as I'm sure he's a very good character, I think the time is probably right to kind of move on from him. We saw, I think, at times in the Championship where when he was played at centre back, he was asked to kind of play out from the back at times, and that was how you were caught out a few times. I still think he's probably, a spirited defender who might be good for a few games, but I certainly don't think he's someone you'd want to be relying on every week.
So let's talk about this week's game against Peterborough, because the game is still in doubt due to snow. But Peterborough come to this game 4th on the table. And I was reading an op-ed this week, and the author of the op-ed said that automatics could be unlikely. Playoffs is still on the card, though. How are Peterborough doing this season? And again, do you reckon they can make automatics or the playoffs? I know they're 4th on the table, but the League One is a very tight league.
Yeah, it is a tight league. I'm not sure about Peterborough because I think going forward, they've got Jonathan Clark-Harris, who's among the top goal scorers. He's a good focal point, and they've got Siriki Dembele, who on his day is absolutely the best in this division with his skill and two-footedness, and so exciting to watch at times. I think sometimes when Clark-Harris isn't at his clinical best, and when Dembele isn't sort of skipping away from everyone that challenges him, I do think that Posh maybe find it difficult to kind of control games in other ways. And I think there's been question marks over whether the likes of Reece Brown, for example, who's been their kind of the playmaker, if you like, in their 3-4-2-1 system, whether he's been as consistent as they would have liked. I think they've had issues with injuries at the back now and again as well. So yeah, that's kind of affected them. If I were pushed for an answer now, I think they can the top two. But if I were pushed for an answer now, I would probably say they'd finish in the playoffs.
So Peterborough usually line up with a 3-4-2-1. And in the last game, they didn't have the fair share of possession, yet they still won. The 3-4-2-1. Sorry, do you reckon it's a good formation, and do you reckon it's a consistent enough formation to get them over the line and to get them, hopefully, for them into the automatics?
Possibly, I think with 3-4-2-1, they quite often change it to the 4-2-3-1, sometimes to the switch formation mid-game or to adapt to the opposition. And I think quite a big factor in that is the versatility of several players. So they've got Nathan Thompson, who's a right-sided centre-back who sometimes plays right back. He's very good in his recovery runs and very strong in the challenge at times as well. And he's got that versatility. Same with Joe Ward, who's quite a selfless player, tends to play on the right-hand side either as a wing-back or as a right-sided midfielder. And then you're looking at Dan Butler, who plays left wing-back and can sometimes fill in at left back. He's quite solid and can put the odd good cross in from deep. So so I think they kind of changed to adapt to the opposition really, and I think that flexibility is quite important for Darren Ferguson. But as I said in the previous answer, I think they're more likely to finish in the playoffs than in the top two.
So you mentioned the playoffs, and they're struggling to transfer their home form to away games. At the end of the day, could that maybe affect where they finish in the overall table? Because again, they're a very good side at home, but away they're quite inconsistent.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much I'd want to read into home and away form. It's not something I've generally put a whole lot of weight on in the past, even when fans have been there, because I think that you look at what a team produces over the course of the season, and sometimes it can just be coincidental that a team performs better at home than it does away, or vice versa. But I think certainly with the fans, I can't really think of too many reasons apart from travelling why an away fixture would be different to a home fixture. So I think you've just got to look at where Peterborough are, judge them based on where they are in the table, rather than pick too much out of what their home form and away form is.
So something that Ipswich should really be wary about is their defence, because they play with a back three, or they played with a back three last time. Frankie Kent, Nathan Thompson and Mark Beavers, and they've been a highly impressive unit. They've supported Christy Pims really well, who hasn't really faced many shots. How important has their defence been to, well, they're doing well this season, their overall success this season? And do you reckon Ipswich they'll break through it?
For sure, yeah. I think the Thompson, as I mentioned as well, is a very committed defender. He's certainly puts his body on the line, and then you've got the aerial prowess and experience of Mark Beavers, who's won promotion from this level, of course, before with Bolton Wanderers. And then you've got Frankie Kent on the left, who again isn't shy to putting a challenge in, and he's also quite a good ball player. I suppose that the one issue for Posh would be that none of those centre-backs are left-footed. So maybe when they play with the back three, that's a bit of an issue, because I think you would ideally want certainly the left-sided defender to be pretty good at pressing the ball down the channel, and maybe the fact they haven't got that has encouraged opposing teams to press them. I saw them against Crewe earlier in the season when they actually lost 2-0, and like 2-0 win they had against them on Saturday. And I think when opponents press them, their use of the ball was maybe a little bit questionable. Sometimes they went long too early to Jonson Clark-Harris, and he found himself a little bit isolated. So sometimes the distribution from deep isn't everything it can be. And I do think that they need a little bit more from someone like Reece Brown, who has that ability to kind of collect the ball from deep and really dictate the tempo, which he's shown the potential to do, but you just want him, you want more from him on a more consistent basis. But I think in Beavers, Thompson and Kent, they've got 3 very committed defenders, and I guess that shows in terms of the defensive record, just 23 goals conceded in 25 games.
So you spoke about them being occasionally vulnerable at the back. Could they potentially spring a tactical surprise? Could they maybe switch to a 4-2-3-1, which they have been playing a lot this season? Could they maybe switch to, I don't know, maybe a different formation than that to see whether they can break through Ipswich?
I'd be surprised if they go away from 3-4-2-1 or 4-2-3-1. I think Darren Ferguson has gone between those 2 formations all season, and I wouldn't really expect him to go away from that. I suppose the concern for them going into this Ipswich game would be that Luke Thomas, of course, and Freddie Sears are probably going to operate quite close to Troy Parrott in what will be for Ipswich very much a 4-3-3 rather than a 4-5-1. And I suppose you've got Alan Judge in there, of course. And I think for Peterborough, they might feel like they want the insurance of the extra centre back to deal with those 3 forwards, especially if there's a lot of rotation of movement, whereas they might feel that they'll be caught out a little bit more or run that extra risk if they go with the back 4. So if I had to guess, I would say, I'm not Darren Ferguson, of course, but if I had to guess, I would probably say that they'll go with the 3-4.
So let's talk about this weekend because not this weekend, this week, sorry, because we have a busy day tomorrow in the Sky Bet League One. Accrington Stanley are at home to Plymouth. Blackpool play Burton. Bristol Rovers play Oxford. Hull play Lincoln. Northampton play Wigan. Peterborough play Ipswich, of course, and they're just a few of the fixtures. But Sunderland have been surprising, really. They came to Portman Road and they played incredibly well. And I thought they're probably, again, one of the best sides that we saw at Portman Road, in my opinion. They've been really inconsistent there. Could they beat Shrewsbury? And why have they been so inconsistent in League One this season?
Yeah, it's a very strange one, isn't it, with Sunderland? Because in Lee Johnson's first game in charge, they actually drew with Wigan Athletic. That was a few hours before Lee Johnson was appointed. No, they didn't draw. They lost 1-0 even. And then the following week, they actually went and won 4-0 at Lincoln City, where they produced some really free-flowing football with Charlie Wyke in great form, and they had Aidan McGeady and Jack Diamond combining really well. And then after that, you're looking at draws with AFC Wimbledon, Northampton, well, of course, are a good side. And then they won 3-0 at Wimbledon, where Charlie Wyke really came to the fore. And then, defeats to Plymouth Argyle, and then a couple of wins, and then the draw with Gillingham. So, it's been very inconsistent. Obviously, drew with MK Dons last time out. Probably a bit of hope from the last 4 games, taking 8 points from those matches. But I think what Lee Johnson will want is try to build on those dominant performances, especially like the one at Lincoln in his second game in charge, where you saw that fluency that you'd kind of come to expect from a Lee Johnson side at this level. But I think the one positive would be the form of Charlie Wyke. He's been excellent lately.
So, talking about Sunderland and Shrewsbury, we are playing Shrewsbury next Saturday. Shrewsbury are managed by Steve Cotterill, who unfortunately is battling COVID. He's still not very well. And they've been cut, or Aaron Wilbraham, has been their caretaker manager. How do you think Shrewsbury will fare for the rest of the season, and how have they managed without Steve Cotterill? Aaron Wilbraham, of course, being, well, I'm going to say this again, a caretaker manager, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. I think they've been without Steve Cotterill in person, I suppose, because he hasn't been on the touchline. But it doesn't feel like they're managerless because he's been very active, even from hospital. And listen, Steve Cotterill is very well liked by certain people, Cheltenham Town, Bristol City fans, and a lot of people within the game. And I'm sure we all wish him a healthy recovery in the appropriate timescale. And I think what's really admirable about Steve Cotterill is that even when he's been in hospital, he's still kind of taken upon himself to contribute to his role as manager, which you wouldn't think it's possible. But he watched the game, he picked the team, he watched the game, in his hospital bed. He did the half-time team talk from his hospital bed in one of the recent games. So I think the Shrewsbury players are still feeling the energy that Steve Cotterill's bringing to the role, even if he's not actually there. So I certainly think that context makes a difference. They've got in Harry Chapman, a lad on loan from Blackburn, who's made a real difference to against Peterborough in one of the more recent games, and he certainly provides some individual magic. But they've also got a very solid back three of Rove John Williams, Anibal Plandell, and Aaron Pierre, who played very well as a unit last season. So I think they're going to be a very hard working side and very good off the ball with those moments of magic from Chapman on it.
So another high-flying game this weekend, just to pick out a few, will be Hull versus Lincoln. Lincoln are, of course, at the top of the table, I think. Apologies if I've got that wrong. But who do you reckon will win the game, and how do you see it going?
Yeah, well, Lincoln, I think, have been fantastic this season. I'm a massive fan of Michael Appleton and the work that he's done. And I think in their 3-0 win at Gillingham last time out, it was kind of showed that they weren't on top throughout that game. They weren't dominant, I wouldn't say, Lincoln, in terms of general play. But when they did attack, there was so much more quality in terms of their attacks than what their opponents produced. And I think that's really going to stand them in good stead. That trio with Morgan Rogers, who I think is on loan from Manchester City and certainly a very talented player. And then they've got Brennan Johnson on loan from Nottingham Forest, who's been a fantastic addition. And of course, Tom Hopper, who's a very athletic striker, a brilliant spring on him, and then George Grant kind of supporting from behind. So I think because of the quality those that quartet provide, Lincoln don't need to be on top absolutely every minute of every game in order to be a serious threat. And I think that's quite a big advantage in this season where you're playing so many games. It's actually going to be very difficult to be on top for most of all of them. And I think it's quite a big advantage for Lincoln that sometimes they can be in second gear and still be able to, when they get out of second gear, they can still sort of go and do damage. Hull, of course, coming to this one off the back of that 1-0 defeat at Burton. And I think for to choose a winner, I think I'd probably side with Imps.
So to end this show, I just want to ask you for your predictions for tomorrow's Ipswich game, Peterborough versus Ipswich, sorry. What do you reckon the score will be, and who do you reckon the standout player will be in the game tomorrow?
I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw. I think that Ricky Dembele, if he brings his A game, will probably be the best player for Peterborough. But I'm also really excited to see what Troy Parrott can do for Ipswich. So I think those two players will do damage at both ends, and I think it'll be quite an even contest.
So thank you very much for appearing on my show. And just to plug something real quick, this show is now on iTunes, so don't forget to subscribe to We Follow the Town on iTunes, where you can get your weekly fix of previews, match reviews, and, well, general podcasts about Ipswich. Thank you very much for tuning in, and don't forget to tune in on Wednesday for a review of this game, where I will be having Luke Hume joining me on this show. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Gabriel Sutton as well, and goodbye.